We are on day 85 with the Course Companions, reading A Course in Miracles, complete and annotated edition. We are on chapter 5, the Holy Spirit, section 4, sharing the Holy Spirit. And I'm going to begin reading. And what I'd like to do is go back and read the footnotes. I've been doing that with the lessons, and I don't know if it's beneficial to you for me to do it that way. Please give me your thoughts and feelings. But I feel like it's a smoother reading. Let me know how you feel about it, if you're following me and listening, which way you prefer. When I'm reading it, I feel like it's a smoother read to go ahead and read it all and then go back and read the footnotes, because it's still fresh in my memory and I can relate it back to the sentence and the content. But please let me know your thoughts. Section 4, sharing the Holy Spirit. I do not have the Course Companions notes for today because I'm reading a day ahead, so I will read those tomorrow. The way to learn to know your brother is by perceiving the Holy Spirit in him. We have already said that the Holy Spirit is the bridge or thought transfer of perception to knowledge, so we can use the terms as if they were related, because in his mind they are. This relationship must be in his mind, because unless it were, the separation between the two ways of thinking would not be open to healing. He is part of the Holy Trinity because his mind is partly yours and also partly God's. This needs clarification not in statement, since we have said this before, but in experience. The Holy Spirit is the idea of healing. Being thought, the idea gains as it is shared. Being the call for God, it is also the idea of God. If you are part of God, it is also the idea of yourself as well as of all the parts of God. The idea of the Holy Spirit shares the properties of other ideas because it follows the laws of the universe of which it is part. Therefore, it is strengthened by being given away. It increases in you as you give it to your brothers. Since thoughts do not have to be conscious to exist, your brother does not have to be aware of the Holy Spirit either in himself or in you for this miracle to occur. He may have dissociated the call for God just as you have, but the dissociation is healed in both of you as you see the call in him and thus acknowledge its being. If you say of a brother that you are determined not to see him that way, you are speaking negatively. But if the same idea is stated positively, you can see the power of it. It means that there are two ways of seeing your brother, and also that they are diametrically opposed to one another. These two ways must be in your mind because you are the perceiver. They must also be in his mind because you are perceiving him. What you are really saying then is that you will not look at him through your ego or perceive his ego in him. Stated positively, you will see him through the Holy Spirit in your mind and perceive the Holy Spirit in his. What you acknowledge in your brother, you are acknowledging in yourself. What you share, you strengthen. The voice of the Holy Spirit is weak in you. That is why you must share it, because it must be increased in strength before you can hear it. It is impossible to hear it in yourself while it is so weak in your own mind. It is not weak in itself, but it is limited by your unwillingness to hear it. Will itself is an idea and therefore strengthened by being shared. You have made the mistake of looking for the Holy Spirit in yourself, and that is why your meditations may have frightened you. By adopting the ego's viewpoint, you undertook an ego-alien journey with the ego as guide. This was bound to produce fear. The better idea of perceiving the Holy Spirit in your brother needs to be strengthened in both you and him. You can increase this idea by giving it to him. Delay is of the ego because time is its concept. Delay is obviously a time idea. Both time and delay are meaningless in eternity. We have said before that the Holy Spirit is God's answer to the ego. Everything of which the Holy Spirit reminds you is in direct opposition to the ego's notions, because true and false perceptions are themselves opposed. The Holy Spirit has the task of undoing what the ego has made. He must undo it in the same realm of discourse in which the ego itself operates, or the mind would be unable to understand the change. We have repeatedly emphasized the fact that one level of the mind is not understandable to another. So it is with the ego and the spirit, and with time and eternity. Eternity is an idea of God, so the spirit understands it perfectly. Time is a belief of the ego, so the lower mind, which is the ego's domain, accepts it without question. The only aspect of time which is really eternal is now. That is what we really mean when we say that now is the only time. The literal nature of this statement does not mean anything to the ego. It interprets it at best to mean don't worry about the future. This is not what it really means at all. The Holy Spirit is the mediator between the interpretations of the ego and the knowledge of the Spirit. His ability to deal with symbols enables him to work against the ego's beliefs in its own language. His equal ability to look beyond symbols into eternity also enables him to understand the laws of God for which he speaks. He can thus perform the function of reinterpreting what the ego makes, not by destruction, but by understanding. Understanding is light, and light leads to knowledge. The Holy Spirit is in light because He is in you who are light. But you yourself do not know this. It is therefore the task of the Holy Spirit to reinterpret you on behalf of God. You cannot understand yourself alone. This is because you have no meaning apart from your rightful place in the sonship and the rightful place of the sonship in God. This is your life, your eternity, and yourself. It is of this that the Holy Spirit reminds you. It is this that the Holy Spirit sees. This vision invariably frightens the ego because it is so calm. Peace is the ego's greatest enemy because according to its interpretation of reality, war is the guarantee of its survival. The ego becomes strong in strife because you believe there is strife. You will react viciously because the idea of danger has entered your mind. This idea itself is an appeal to the ego. The Holy Spirit is as vigilant as the ego to the call of danger, opposing it with His strength just as the ego welcomes it with all its might. The Holy Spirit counters this welcome by welcoming peace. Peace and eternity are as closely related as are time and war. Perception as well as knowledge derives meaning from relationships. Those which you accept are the foundations of your beliefs. The separation is merely another term for a split mind. It was not an act, but a thought. Therefore, the idea of separation can be given away just as the idea of unity can. And either way, it will be strengthened in the mind of the giver. The ego is the symbol of the separation, just as the Holy Spirit is the symbol of peace. What you perceive in others, you are strengthening in yourself. You let your mind misperceive, but the Holy Spirit lets your mind reinterpret its own misperceptions. The Holy Spirit is the perfect teacher. He uses only what your mind already understands to teach you that you do not understand it. The Holy Spirit can deal with an unwilling learner without going counter to His will, because part of His will is still for God. Despite the ego's attempts to conceal this part, it is still much stronger than the ego, even though the ego does not recognize it. The Holy Spirit recognizes it perfectly, because it is His own dwelling place, or the place in the mind where He is at home. You are at home there too, because it is a place of peace, and peace is of God. You who are a part of God are not at home except in His peace. If peace is eternal, you are at home only in eternity. The ego made the world as it perceives it, but the Holy Spirit, the reinterpreter of what the ego made, sees it only as a teaching device for bringing you home. The Holy Spirit must perceive time and reinterpret it into the timeless. The mind must be led to eternity through time, because having made time, it is capable of perceiving its opposite. The Holy Spirit must work through opposites, because He must work with and for a mind that is in opposition. Correct and learn, and be open to learning. You have not made truth, but truth can still set you free. Look as the Holy Spirit looks, and understand as He understands. His understanding looks back to God in remembrance of me. He is in holy communion always, and He is part of you. He is your guide to salvation because He holds the remembrance of things past and to come. He holds this gladness gently in your mind, asking only that you increase it in His name by sharing it to increase His joy in you. And now I'll go back and read the footnotes for this section. Okay, we start with 33. The way to learn, this is section 4 of chapter 5, sharing the Holy Spirit. The way to learn to know your brother is by perceiving the Holy Spirit in him. 33. The words learn and know would not normally be used together in this way, since learn is of the realm of perception and know is of the realm of knowledge. However, they can be used together here because, as the next sentence explains, we are seeing in our brother the Holy Spirit, the bridge between perception and knowledge. So the next sentence says, we have already said that the Holy Spirit is the bridge or thought transfer of perception to knowledge. So 34 is text chapter 5, section 2. He represents a state of mind that comes close enough to one-mindedness. That transfer is at last possible. And now we'll go ahead to read footnote 35. This needs clarification, not in statement, since we have said this before, but in experience. 35. And that, he is part of the Holy Trinity because His mind is partially yours and also partially God's. And the clarification is in text chapter 5, section 2. It is partially His will and partially yours. And that's for... And now 36. If you say of a brother that you are determined not to see him that way, you are speaking negatively. 36. This was originally a discussion in which Jesus drew out the implications of something Bill said to Helen. Bill said he was determined not to see you that way, not to see her in an uncharitable light. According to Jesus, this statement was far more powerful than Bill realized. Jesus then proceeded to draw out all the meaning that was contained in Bill's statement. And then we'll go to 37. These two ways must be in your mind because you are the perceiver. And that they are diametrically opposed to one another. The two ways of seeing your brother are 1, seeing his ego, and 2, seeing the Holy Spirit in him. These two ways in you, the perceiver, are seeing him through your ego and seeing him through the Holy Spirit in you. And then moving on to the next page, footnote 38. Will itself is an idea and is therefore strengthened by being shared. This statement about will seems to mean that the will to do something is strengthened when it is shared. For example, when multiple entities will to do the same thing. More specifically, will here seems to refer to the willingness to hear from the previous sentence. The meaning, therefore, seems to be that we should see the willingness to hear the Holy Spirit in other minds and not just in our own. 39. You have made the mistake of looking for the Holy Spirit in yourself, and that is why your meditations may have frightened you. This referred originally to Helen being frightened by her meditations. See text, chapter 4, section 9. By adopting the ego's viewpoint, you undertook an ego-alien journey with the ego as guide. 40. An ego-alien, usually called ego-dystonic, refers to thoughts, desires, and behaviors that are in conflict with the ego's needs and goals. Here, what is ego-alien is the journey we take in meditation, the journey to God. We have said before that the Holy Spirit is God's answer to the ego, and let's look at 41. Text chapter 5, section 2. The Holy Spirit was God's answer to the separation, the means by which the atonement could repair until the whole mind returned to creating. And let's go to 42. He must undo it in the same realm of discourse in which the ego itself operates, or the mind would be unable to understand the change. 42. The Holy Spirit, in other words, does not engage in the thinking error mentioned in chapter 4 of confusing realms of discourse. Confusing realms of discourse is a thinking error which philosophers have recognized for centuries. Confusing realms of discourse is a thinking error which philosophers have recognized for centuries. And then 43, we have repeatedly emphasized the fact that one level of the mind is not understandable to another. Chapter 3, section 6, the levels produced by the separation are disastrous. They cannot but conflict. This is because one is essentially meaningless to another. Freud realized this perfectly, and that is why he conceived as forever irreconcilable the different levels of his psyche. They were conflict-prone by definition because they wanted different things and obeyed different principles. Chapter 3, section 6, one part of the psyche perceives another part as on a different level and does not understand it. This makes the parts strangers to each other without recognition. All right, and we move on to the last page of this section. We go to 44, which is, thank you for bearing with me. There it is. You have not made truth, but truth can still set you free. John 8:32. And you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. Look as the Spirit looks and understand as He understands. His understanding looks back to God in remembrance of me. 45. Luke 22:19. And he took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. The Course here is portraying the Holy Spirit as being constantly in a state of holy communion with God, forever looking to God in remembrance of Jesus. And then, He is in holy communion always, and He is part of you. He is your guide to salvation because He holds the remembrance of things past and to come. 46. This is a reference to Shakespeare's Sonnet 30, which begins, When to the sessions of sweet silent thought I summon up remembrance of things past, I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought. In the sonnet, the things past are losses, sorrows, and woes of the past, including precious friends the poet had lost. In the Course, they are things of heaven, which, though they seem lost, will come back to us because the Holy Spirit holds them in memory for us. That explains the more joyful phrase, things past and to come. I just want to read the last sentence of this section because it's beautiful. He holds His gladness gently in your mind, asking only that you increase it in His name by sharing it to increase His joy in you. And that is day 85, section 4, sharing the Holy Spirit. And thank you for your patience with my Greta. She was nudging me while I was reading and kept nudging myself in the book. So thank you for your patience. Now she's knocked out. I love you. Thank you for joining.